Good morning, Wall Street winners. Today is Tuesday, April 17th. And as we look at what the futures are doing on the Bloomberg app, we can see that the Dow is up almost half a point. The S&P up just about 1%, 0.1%, and the NASDAQ pretty much even, up a little bit at 0.03%. So we have had some interesting earnings come out this morning. If we flip over to the Yahoo Finance app, we don't follow United Healthcare, but we saw United Healthcare come out with good guidance, and I believe they beat on expectations. And that's been doing different things to the other healthcare stocks that we follow, but the one that's up significantly, but has taken a beating this year is Humana. So if you look at the Humana 6-month chart, I mean, this was a $500 stock back in the December-January timeframe, and then took a dive pre-earnings and took a dive post-earnings, and those are kind of seen right here, the pre-earning and then the earnings dive down to the 350 level, and then it took another dive here in April from the 348, 350 level down to the 300s. Looks like it's starting to climb back. So this was an interesting options call play into the new year, and it still could be potentially back here in the 300 range. Bought a call for 330 to buy it at 330 in, I think it was January of 2025, and that call has done pretty well, and there may still be some legs left in something like that. So basically, with a call option, you're agreeing to pay a premium or pay a price to purchase a stock at a future price at a price some point in the future. So you pick the price, you pick the future date, and that establishes what's known as an options contract, and you pay for the options contract. Usually you'll find that the price, let's say that it's at round numbers, let's say the stock's at 300, and a year from now, you want to pay 330, you're probably going to pay the difference, $30 in price, plus a little bit of a spread or a premium. So you might pay $32, $33 in that case. And that gives you the ability to buy it at the 330 price a year from now. You're obviously planning on seeing that stock appreciate beyond 330 and maybe go to 350, 360, maybe even back to 400, 450, and that would then appreciate the value of the option. And you can sell that at any time and take the profits on the option, or you can wait for the option to come to conclusion, and then you can purchase the stock at the price that was agreed to in the option, and then you can hold those options. So one other way of doing it, a little bit more sophisticated, not intended for a new investor by any means, but one of the many, call it derivative options that's out there in the markets today. If we look at oil is taking a beating right now. The conflict over there in the Middle East with Iran and Israel and all of the other groups involved is still ongoing, but did not materialize to the extent that some thought in terms of the Iran counterattack on Israel. It was pretty much defeated by the Israelis and other defense systems. So we're seeing crude drop a little bit. We are coming into the spring, so I expect we're going to see this turn around in the next couple of weeks. But really what the markets are focused on right now is earnings season and some of the announcements about layoffs coming out. So we did have some earnings today. If we scroll through the tech list just quickly, we have Netflix coming out after market today. So that will be an interesting announcement to see how they're doing. Again, one of my favorites here, everything dropped off yesterday. About noon, things started to go to about even, and then at 1 o'clock, things just dropped off, although it started off very good. And we saw NVIDIA drop down to 460. We saw Meta drop down to 500. I think both of those would be great purchases this morning as we go into the open. Google dropped down to 156. Again, a stock that was up in the 160s. That's a pretty strong purchase point right there, in my opinion. But if we go down to what reported, Bank of America reported today, not a stock I follow, came out with, I believe, worse than expected earnings. It was off on profit. We also had Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley had better than expected, and there you can see that it jumped up. It's up about almost 3.5, call it close to 4%. In pre-market trading. So we'll see what that does. Yesterday, we had a great open for MTB. So MTB, M&T Bank, was a stock that I picked up late last week as it was on the decline. And if we look at the 5-day, I said I like that stock in the low 130s and bought some in the 134 range, and then watched that go up to 145 yesterday and then trickle back down to end just under 141. But it had some good earnings coming out of its organization yesterday. Goldman had some good earnings. You can see that it popped yesterday. It got up pretty high into the, well, it went up, I think, $11, $12. Not as high as it was the other day where I think it was up $22. But here you can see, again, if we had looked at that on Friday down at 387, very attractive in the 380s, and then earnings were positive. It came up to 412. It's now settled around 400. I think we're still going to have we still have some legs in this. I think it's going to go to the 430-ish area, not immediately, but within the next 3 months as it moves into earnings season. What we're seeing is there seems to be good trading results and revenue coming out of these companies. The borrowing is a concern. So when we get to the banks, not necessarily the investment companies, but the banks, we're seeing that borrowing is down because interest rates are high. And people are putting that off, hoping for probably interest rates to come down at some point this year. Maybe a quarter or half a point, and that's when maybe they'll step in and do some borrowing, especially on the business side. But that does not seem to be affecting the investment banks. We had Charles Schwab announce yesterday. They took a bit of a pop in the morning and climbed from 69.75 up to 73. They then settled down around 71. So the whole market fell off yesterday. We also had a number yesterday on retail sales. So this was the surprising part to me because the stock started off strong. The retail sales announcement came out around 8:30 in the morning. And what we heard on retail sales they were better than expected. So that means consumers are spending, and that means that inflation is probably going to continue to rise. And if that's the case, and retail sales are up and consumers are continuing to spend, and that boosts inflation or keeps it at the higher than expected levels, what it's going to do is put more pressure on the Fed to push off rate decreases. So it's an interesting data point. I mean, one data point is meaningless, but when combined with many others, it's an interesting one to follow. And that's putting pressure on the financials, particularly the banks. I think we're going to see the regional banks, some of which have announced already, affected, but more and more in this coming week and next week will make announcements. I think it's going to have a negative effect on those. So there may be an opportunity in the regionals to pick some of these up at a better price than they are right now. What we did see with Charles Schwab was we had some promising numbers on growth and year-over-year numbers. So this isn't a company or a stock that I think has the potential to get up to 85, maybe 90 by year end. And because it's based on more trading than it is on banking type revenues. So that's where we are today. The tech stocks fell off yesterday. Some will be coming back. I think you're going to see you're definitely going to see some movement today on Netflix. If we get some good earnings, that thing could pop. I'm looking at Meta to go down into the 490s, and if it enters the 490s, I'm definitely going to look at that. I feel it's very attractive. The other one yesterday that fell for the reason that it's looking at acquiring another firm, but at a discounted price, which to me should have had that stock pop a little bit, is Salesforce or CRM. So CRM was off 7% yesterday. That's a huge drop. I expect this to get back to 300 within the next 10 business days. So it's at a very, very attractive price point right now. And it announces earnings fairly a ways out at the end of May, beginning of June. So certainly before it gets to earnings, but if you were to hold that into earnings and earnings are positive, I think you're going to see a pop up into the 330s at that point. But I think this has a high likelihood of getting back into the 300s in the very short term. So that would be one of the ones I'm looking at on the tech side today. And that's where we are on April 16th.